Satoru Gojo, the wielder of the six eyes, the honored one, the strongest. All epithets deserving of one of JJK's most beloved characters. But what is it that truly makes Gojo so superior? Well, the answer to that is his curse technique, the Limitless, and the Six Eyes. A combination that when used together damn near makes Gojo untouchable. So today, we're going to be going over every Bleach character that I think could defeat Satoru Gojo. I'm your host Ab-Stract, and this is the Ab-Stract section. Before we get started, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Now, just so we're clear, Bleach scales massively above JJK, so what I will be doing is presenting individuals that could overcome Gojo's abilities without the use of Reiatsu negging or power nullification. Let's get started. By now, you more than likely know and understand how Gojo's ability works, but on the off chance you've never seen JJK and don't know, I will briefly explain his ability to you. The Limitless, an inherited technique passed down through the Gojo clan. In its simplest terms, it is the power to stop. But even that's not totally true. See, by bringing the concept of infinity into reality, it allows Gojo to infinitely put space between him and anything he considers a threat. Essentially, attacks that have any type of kinetic motion or conceivable limit of motion will never reach him. Basically, if your attack travels, you're not hitting Gojo, but there are even caveats to saying that. This makes tagging, let alone defeating Gojo, extremely difficult. He is able to use this ability at all times and has it automatically set to respond to specific things like mass, shape, and speed. He can stop point-blank attacks, ranged attacks, surprise attacks, you name it. If it has momentum and is of a certain size, it ain't working. But that's for the average and the ordinary. This is Bleach we're talking about. Let's get into who can bypass infinity. Coming in first, we have Yami Realgo and his ability Gonzui. This allows him to forcefully suck out your soul simply by inhaling. The Limitless technique would have no defense against this, as it is pure soul manipulation that doesn't require contact, momentum, force, or distance. It only demands that you be within Yami's effective range. I will however say, if your spiritual powers are of a certain level, this ability can be resisted. So if you think Gojo is at that level, then the ability itself wouldn't work, but nonetheless, it is an ability that can bypass the Limitless. Next we have, and this may surprise some, Orihime and her ability Shunshu Rika. Orihime is able to create force fields that, if anything is caught between, can be rejected. In other words, she can return things to their most primitive, primal, and even non-existent state. To directly quote Aizen, her powers limit, reject, and deny all phenomena that have affected her subject. She can make it as if the damage never happened. This is far more than temporal or spatial regression. In fact, it oversteps the limitations set by gods. Her powers violate divine law. Now, of course, due to Orihime's soft nature, we've never seen her reject the person to non-existence. But Aizen's explanation of her abilities, plus the fact that she was confident she could reject the Hogyoku to a state of non-existence, empowers me to say she could absolutely pull this off. So as long as she was able to get Gojo in between her Shunshu Rika, she could reject everything in that space, starting with the Limitless that surrounds that space, followed by Gojo himself, the Six Eyes, etc. All the way up until the point he no longer exists or exists in a state Orihime could easily handle him, and even then she would probably just keep and raise baby Gojo. Moving on to number 3, this is someone who is pretty similar to Orihime. Hachigen. He's a Vizard as well as a Kido master, and the ability that would allow him to defeat Gojo and the Limitless is the same one that defeated Barragan. Hako Okuri. This is a Kido that allows Hachigen to teleport objects, and as we've seen, he can place these objects directly inside you. So if Hachigen paired this attack with Hado 54, otherwise known as the Abolition in Flame, he could set his hand on fire and immediately transport it inside Gojo, recreating the effect Barragan's Spear had on him. And for some context on Hado 54, it's a fire attack that erases the very existence of its target, and it was able to completely destroy Grimmjow's arm, someone who scales massively above the JJK verse, and it would absolutely work on Gojo for this reason. And just in case you missed it, Hachigen would win simply because Limitless cannot stop teleportation, especially if that thing that's being teleported breaches your body. Fourth on our list is Stern with an F as Not, and his ability, the Fear. This ability allows him to induce a primal instinctual fear if his thorns make contact with you. Now, while this of course will be stopped by the Limitless, in his Vollständig form however, Tartarforus, Asnot can instill fear through the optic nerve. This is something the Limitless nor Gojo blindfolded would be able to stop, because as long as Gojo can perceive Asnot, the effects of fear would take place, and simply closing your eyes after the fact or even using reverse curse technique to attempt to heal your brain from the fear would be useless, as fear is something that exists in your memories. Also, keep in mind the fear Asnot makes you feel is unlike anything you've ever experienced. It forces his opponent in a crippling state of what can only be described as pure terror. It made capable fighters such as Byakuya start trembling, having intrusive thoughts, and even doubt himself, thus allowing Asnot to injure him several times. And this was all in his base. It made a post-Royal Guard training Rukia not even be able to attack Asnot while he was standing perfectly still. Gojo would have to deal with this in his holy form, where the ability would undoubtedly be stronger. Now this is just my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me. Asnot would scare the living shit out of Gojo, and this would force Gojo to drop his Limitless barrier because his mind would be too occupied and overwhelmed with fear. Now as I stated previously, Gojo has his Limitless set to an automatic state, but I believe that condition lasts so long as he's rational and within his right mind. But I understand anyone saying just because he's irrationally afraid doesn't mean he'd lose control over his technique. Nonetheless, the fear is an ability that can bypass the Limitless. Coming in at number 5, we have Barragan Louisaban. Barragan's win con comes by way of, and no surprise here, Respera. Yeah, give it up for Barragan, the one-trick pony. As we've already covered in Barragan vs. the Nnoitra verse, he has no issue aging energy, and that's all the Limitless technique is at the end of the day. Gojo achieves all he does with curse energy. In the case of the Limitless, he manipulates his curse energy at an atomic level to control space. All Barragan would have to do is send a continuous wave of Respera at Gojo, and that's pretty much it. His barrier would decay and Gojo would be next. Not a lot of complications to consider. Gojo uses an energy-based technique, and Barragan is able to instantly age energy out of existence. Now, while you may argue that Gojo can pump almost an infinite amount of energy to his barrier because of the 6 eyes and him constantly using reverse curse technique on his brain, I would like to add and remind you that Barragan's ability overtakes anything it makes contact with until that thing is aged out of existence. While it might look like a battle of attrition with Barragan pumping an endless wave of Respera and Gojo just feeding more curse energy into his Limitless, that's far from how it would actually work. The way I see it, one of two things would happen. When Respera makes contact with Gojo's curse energy, it would consume the entire barrier itself, leading to Gojo, since he's the catalyst for that energy being put forth. Or in a game of pseudo tug of war, Gojo could attempt to pump out more energy to his Limitless, thus increasing its effective range and buying him some time. But either way, Respera would be able to overcome this because as Respera is making contact with Gojo's curse energy, it's destroying it, making the barrier between Respera and Gojo thinner and thinner. So that's how Barragan would defeat Gojo. Basically, Respera, one trick pony, bread and butter. Let's go. Next we have our current head captain commander, Shunsui Kiraku. Shunsui can bypass infinity both in Shikai and Bankai. In Shikai he has shadow manipulation. He could use this to appear from within Gojo's infinity itself, or send slashes at him from a distance. In Bankai, his whole ability is an area of effect, and if you're in its effective range, you're drawn into it. Now, I don't want to get too much into that because I really am waiting for Course 3 and 4 to flush out Shunsui and Kisuke, but believe, Shunsui absolutely has the means. Moving on to number 7, we have Jugram Hashwalt. Although I still have Jugram on Fraud Watch, I must admit I'm a huge fan of his shrift, The Balance. With this, he is able to turn misfortune into good fortune and good fortune into misfortune within a certain radius of himself. And although the anime hasn't shown us his full potential yet, what we have seen is more than enough to definitively say he could bypass Limitless. A great example is when Jugram was tasked with executing BG9 and Songdu. As he goes to kill Songdu activates his shrift, the Iron, thus blocking and avoiding a fatal attack from Jugram. Now, this good fortune of surviving Yugram's first attack is noted and stored within the ethers. When Jugram goes to strike Songdu again, he completely cleaves through him with no issue whatsoever. I believe a similar thing would occur if Jugram attacked Gojo's Limitless. He would definitely fail the first strike, but then on the second strike, the good fortune of Gojo not being struck would allow Jugram through causality manipulation to strike through Limitless, thus overcoming Gojo's technique. On to number 8, Gremmy. This is almost like a super obvious one. Gremmy has tons of ways of bypassing infinity, like for example trapping Gojo in outer space, turning his bones to noodles, cookies, dust, whatever have you, or he could just have Guanyeo Lee fight Gojo with his abilities. And just in case you guys forgot about who this guy is and what he can do, he has 3 abilities and his power is called the Vanishing Point. In his first stage, he can simply turn invisible. Nothing too crazy there. Version 2 causes his existence to vanish and allows him to leave an after image of himself just before he uses this ability. That would definitely be helpful. And finally, version 3 of the Vanishing Point allows Guanyeo Lee to erase his very existence from his opponent's memory. Now, I'm not saying Gojo wouldn't get killed by Guanyeo Lee. I'm saying due to his abilities, Guanyeo Lee could kill Gojo, but this is about Grimmy. He takes this very easily. In our number 9 seat, we have the smoke god himself. Give it up for Kenpachi Zaraki. Kenpachi, using his Shikai, was able to slice through Grimmy's galaxy room, which contains several hundred, maybe even several thousand stars. Now, why would slicing through this space allow him to bypass infinity? I'll tell you. It's the same reason why Yami can dimension slash his way out of Dorothy's dream space, and the same reason Majin Buu can scream his way out of the hyperbolic time chamber. It's because the space that has to be traversed doesn't matter. Either through hacks or raw power, these individuals can bypass space. And this isn't the first time we've seen this in Bleach. Ukiyoto, without transforming, just simply existing, broke free from a pocket dimension created by Aizen. Ichigo, just casually going Bankai, broke out of Yukio's dimension. So when I say Kenpachi and Shikai would casually slice through Gojo and his infinity, you know I'm telling the truth. Our number 10 spot will be filled by my favorite member of the Schutzstaffel, Lilibaro. This should come as no surprise, but his ability is literally the most straightforward in terms of bypassing infinity. The X-axis allows Lille to punch a hole through anything that is in the line of his barrel and that he considers a target. He says it makes the concept of dodging impossible. I say, well, Oetsu definitely dodged you, but blocking definitely is impossible. So yeah, Lily wouldn't have to worry about Limitless at all. He would punch Gojo full holes and that would be the end of it. Next up is Kisuke Urahara, and while I can't think of any attack in his Shikai, Kisuke would more than be able to harm and bypass Gojo's infinity with his Bankai. Much like Shunsui's Bankai, as long as you're in a certain radius, Kisuke's attack will definitely take effect. And again, much like Shunsui's Bankai, I'd rather not delve too much into what he can do, as the anime will most likely add on to some things and maybe even change things, so we're just gonna leave that there. Number 12 is none other than the former head captain, Shigekuni Genryosai Yamamoto. Now, Yama's path to victory lies in his Bankai, and it's not in any one single attack. It is my belief that upon activation of his Bankai, depending on the distance, Gojo would die from the passive heat released from Yamamoto. And this is him using infinity, curse energy reinforcement, and reverse curse techniques, you name it. He's dying and he's getting burnt to a sender, and then he's getting returned to sender. The reason I'm saying this is because Lloyd yhwach, which is about 80% of the real yhwach's power, had to use Blut Vene, which increases a Quincy's durability to an insane degree. How insane? Insane enough to tank a Getsuga sword swing to the neck from a Bankai Ichigo and not flinch. Insane enough to tank all of Renji's attacks and send Banzakura to the face in the case of As Not. Insane enough to make this yhwach say if it wasn't for his Blut Vene, he'd be burned alive. So yeah, I have no doubt in my mind that upon activation, if Gojo is anywhere near Yama, he dies, like instantly. The last two on our list is the great monk Monoko Osho and none other than the confined Quincy King himself, Yhwach. Let's start with Ichibe. Using his Bankai, Ichibe would be able to splatter ink over Gojo's infinity barrier and either decrease the effectiveness of it or change its name completely so that the concept of infinity doesn't even exist. Yes, I'm actually saying Ichibe would be able to take the word infinity and either reduce its power overall or make the concept non-existent, thus removing Gojo's barrier. Because if he brings infinity into reality and Ichibe takes away that concept, what's he bringing forth? Nothing. Alright, moving on. Yhwach has so many ways to deal with Gojo, it's not even funny. He could steal his power, he could use the Almighty to see and therefore negate Limitless, he could use the Almighty to set up places where Gojo would be and spring them with traps, he could use the power of his fallen Stern Ritter, the X-axis, the fear, whatever you want to pick, the balance. So those are all the people that I believe can bypass the Limitless. I plan on doing a Naruto version of this, but let me know if I missed anyone on the Bleach side. If you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up guys, it really helps me, and stay tuned for more content. There's actually a couple people I forgot to mention, so we'll go through them quickly. Senjumaru. This should have been an obvious one. Senjumaru was able to bypass Naozo's the wind ability. This allows him to deflect anything his instincts pick up on. This means if he has the slightest inclination that an attack is coming, being put forth, or enacted, his ability will deflect that attack no matter what it is. Senjumaru is so damn fast that not only did he not perceive her or anything she did, she had time to stitch up this man a new coat and leave a needle in it that would kill him. And if you disagree with that, I know her Bankai will for sure take him down because it's tailor-made to deal with whoever's inside of it. Toshiro, specifically adult Toshiro. While in this form, Toshiro has the ability to freeze all matter before him, whether that's energy, the elements, concepts, you name it. If his ice makes contact, he literally can power null your ability. Now, how does this interact with infinity? Well, like I said before, all Gojo is doing is manipulating his curse energy at an atomic level to essentially divide space. With how Toshiro's ability functions, the moment it makes contact with infinity, it should freeze Gojo's curse energy and Gojo himself subsequently. Now, it is beyond me how I forgot to mention the GOAT himself, Sosuke Aizen, but all he would have to do is Hado number 90, Kurohitsugi, and that would get the win for him. Hado 90 is described as a torrent of pure gravity that would reduce anyone weaker than Dangai Ichigo to dust or atoms. Infinity would not be able to deal with this because it's just pure pressure at an insane level. I'm your host Ab-Stract, and this is the Ab-Stract section.